Without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Toni Collette, Andrea Riseborough, Timothy Spall, Kate Winslet, and Joe Anders. Thank you all so much for being here and for the film. I can't think of a better way to begin than to ask you, Kate, and you, Joe, about how the film came to be. It's a family affair, both in terms of subject matter, but also in your collaboration as the writer and director of the film, and star, of course. So could you speak about where the project began and at what point this collaboration emerged?
Yeah, sure. Thank you all for being here. I did a screenwriting course back in the UK when I was 19, and we were encouraged on the course to write from the heart, and I sort of went back in my memories to try and find something that really stuck out to me, or moments that really stuck out to me and resonated with me and stuck with me. And I sort of landed on the passing of my own grandmother, and I was 13 when she passed, so the story is totally fictional that you all just watched, but the moment where I was standing in the room with her and my family and all of my extended family and cousins and uncles and all of these people, and I remember really feeling the love in the air and realizing that the only thing that mattered in that one moment was that we were all there for this one woman, or all from this one woman, and it was an amazing moment in time, and that sort of became the emotional starting place for the script that I wound up writing. And then when I showed it to my mum, I didn't actually think it would ever be made into anything. I showed it to my mum thinking, well, I basically handed it to her and asked her, "Mum, is this any good, or is this a load of shit?" And I suppose it wasn't a load of shit.
That's completely true. So Joe handed me his script and was very much kind of like, would you read this? It's probably shit, but just please, would you, tell me what you think. Actually, don't tell me what you think. Could you just lie? Because I don't think I could handle it. And I read it, and it was very, very clear to me straight away that my son had written a solid screenplay. As I was reading it, I found myself saying all the lines. And as an actor, you know that as soon as you feel compelled to say the dialogue of every single character, I was so taken by that. And also how he had made it so funny, and how it was not a cancer story. It's not about someone who dies, that it's this film about a messy, complicated, completely relatable family, and how everyone had their own trajectory. They all have their storyline that you are taken by and feel invested in. And I just thought that was incredible. And how he'd set it at Christmas, I thought was such a masterstroke. So we have that feeling of the time passing as they get closer to that day, wanting their mother to make it to that day. And it's, of course, a time of year that for so many people is emotionally very complicated anyway. And so I said to him, well, we're going to make it into a film. And he's like, don't do that. That's an annoying thing to say, because don't do that. And so immediately I had to encourage him, finish it. Right, he still had 20 pages to go, work on it some more. And I said, I will produce it, because that's been a part of my life for the last 5 or so years, and I'll play one of the sisters. And then I was doing the regime with Andrea, and Andrea happened to say to me, "Well, how's Joe doing? What's he up to?" I said, "Actually, he's written this really great script." She said, "Oh my God, let me read it." So I sort of snuck it to Andrea, and she went, "Please, can I play Molly?" So I turned to Joe, and I'm like, "Okay, look, Andrea wants to play Molly, so I'm not kidding, I'm not pretending, I'm not trying to big you up here." And then Joe worked on the script to such an extent that it was tight enough and ready to go out to directors. And we'd made this wish list of brilliant actors. I'd spoken to most of them, not Helen Mirren at that point, and told them what it was. And I just suddenly thought, we can't give this away. How can we possibly let this go? You know, it felt so personal to both of us at that point. And so I just plucked up the courage and did it. And I thought, you know what? If I don't do this now, I may never do it. And because I care so much about trying to change the culture around female filmmakers, I really felt like, you know, I can't keep saying this stuff. I can't keep advocating for other women if I'm not myself being brave enough to take that step to try and meaningfully change this culture. And so I did it. And then Helen Mirren said yes, and I was like, oh my God, okay, now we are really off to the races. And that's really how it came together.
I'm so moved by the family that you've constructed in this film, the sort of lived-in, textured dynamic of this group of people who happen to be related and happen to share a history, but might not have much in common superficially and have to perhaps find common ground, find ways to reach each other through this crisis moment. And I'm curious if you could, perhaps both as a director and as a writer, what were some of the challenges in getting to the heart of this family and building this kind of network of relationships that then you realize through performance and bringing together a cast and what was that process like for you both?
Well, I mean, I feel like it starts with, you know, it always starts with the characters, and once I sort of felt like I really knew who all these people were, and I really started to feel like I was writing them as truthfully as I possibly felt like I could, and they all started feeling like they were speaking for themselves, you know, that's when those characters just start developing. And then as you're writing, you know, and as these conversations are appearing and they have these interactions, it sort of winds up feeling quite natural what their responses will be to each other, because after, you know, like, I mean, by the end of it, it was like over 2 years that I'd been like rewriting it. You know, you really start to learn all those people and learn what their responses are like to the different members of their families, and it all starts to sort of just work, and you know, it feels like everything's like a very well-oiled machine. So the family just sort of started growing, and all of the interactions started feeling more and more realistic. And then, of course, the unbelievable performances, you know, just like add so many other layers to the ideas that I was having, you know, so early on in the process. But then also, you know, the set that Mum was running and how everyone, it was a really, really safe and free set that Mum was running, and everyone, I think, can agree it was like an amazing energy on set, and everyone felt so able to just like experiment and try and discover and just be these people. And you know, they all added their own, you know, brilliant minds to the characters that I'd written. I'm waffling now, but you go.
Honestly, when you give roles to brilliant actors like all of these people, that's when it becomes the most exciting part, really, because there's a magic that happens. They start saying things and reacting and responding and coming up with ideas that, you know, Joe may never have had, I may never have had. And of course, you want to hand it to them and give them that space to go and make mistakes and stumble over themselves and each other in order to create that mess and that chaos. It mattered a lot to me to bring everyone into those early creative conversations around things like costume, for example, which typically an actor doesn't really get that involved in that very, very early on. You know, they might walk into a fitting and there's a kind of a rack full of options. But I was sending everybody images that meant something to me. Does this feel like the kind of world you want that character to operate in that particular moment? Talking to Johnny, I remember having a long conversation with him because I realised that it made total sense for Connor to be in his pyjamas for the whole of story day one, but I didn't want to send our costume designer off to a million charity shops looking for worn-in flannel pyjamas without making sure that that was in line with how Johnny believed Connor might function that day. And also talking to our art department too, so that each actor felt that they had real ownership over the interior world of these people they were playing, you know. So I remember sending Andrea images of the location that we found for Molly's house, just so she could get some sense of what that kitchen would feel like to operate in, the pivoting from the stove to the fridge, to the children, to the stove, to the fridge, then to the phone, to the door. I wanted her to understand what Molly's morning rhythm would feel like. And honestly, it was such a privilege to be with actors who were completely open to all of that, because I love that stuff of process and putting a character together. And I remember thinking, oh my God, okay, thank God they're happy to do it the way I do it. This is brilliant. This is so exciting. And then being the person running the set, we had 35 days to make this film, and it was a modest budget, and we only had Helen Mirren for 16 days and 7 children. I think I must have been a little bit insane, actually, you know, and but I'm so thrilled to have done it, and it was such a joy. I just never wanted it to finish. I just wanted it to go on and on. I'd still be shooting it now if somebody let me or gave me the money to.
Andrea, you mentioned, or Kate mentioned, that you seized immediately on the character of Molly. I'm curious what drew you to her specifically of the 3 sisters, and what you saw in her that you could build into a living, breathing woman.
Perhaps a little healing, I think, looking back on it now. Molly was possibly the character who felt furthest away from me, and but I thought it was so. This is where I'm going to talk about you, Joe, so just don't get embarrassed. She felt so clear and so beautifully penned. I really understood why she built up so much resentment and how much she craved connection with Julia, who was her closest sister. You know, and Julia leaving the house had been something Molly just never gets over, really, and it becomes the driving, really the catalyst for everything that motivates her moving forward, because siblings are such formative creatures, aren't they? You have this experience with somebody, you're raised almost identically, sort of, perhaps. You have a completely different perspective and perception of the world and memories of what happened. So all of those things drew me to Molly, and I loved that she can't hold her tongue. That was one of the. I'm very good at holding my tongue, and sometimes I just wish I wasn't. So that's wonderful fun.
I should say I'm one of 3 sisters, and the dynamic between the 3 sisters on screen felt so real and true to me. And one aspect of that was sort of Helen's character's maybe remoteness, maybe distance from her sisters, but also fundamentally there's a closeness there. There's a sort of a lifetime of knowledge and familiarity. And Toni, I wonder if you could speak a bit about how you approached that particular challenge of being a sister who maybe is off, sort of living a life far from her family, but
I think it added a certain depth to the character of Helen, because it's easy to kind of laugh at her. In fact, I kind of loved that, that she brought a certain kind of levity to a very intense situation. I always imagined that there had been a certain amount of enmeshment in the family and that she needed to escape somewhat in order to find herself. I also think, kind of conversely and simultaneously, that there would have been also a different kind of abandonment, in that, being the eldest child, as subsequent children were born, the parents shift their gaze to those children, and then, you know, Helen would feel a little lonely and sad. Yeah, so I think I don't think Berlin's the only place she's ever been. I think she's a big traveller and she's open to the world and open to the cosmos, and very much a seeker and a journeying kind of woman who's constantly kind of trying to make herself feel whole and potentially fix certain parts of herself and fill the holes that, well, I don't mean it like that, but yes, I've said it. Okay. I mean, it's a strange way she becomes pregnant, which I also admire. I just love people who have the guts to be themselves, and she's certainly that. So I think when she returns to the family in this moment of absolute challenge and horror, actually, to have to face something like this, it's a real opportunity to revisit things that she ran away from. And I think the character of June very cleverly helps these kids return to, not a factory setting, but maybe just a more loving, kind of connected, natural state, you know, to kind of refuse and heal some things. So it's. I know there's a woman dying in bed of cancer, very beautifully, Helen Mirren, my God. But it's a life-affirming, warm, uplifting, loving film about so much that's positive in life, and that was just such a gift and such an honour to be a part of, Kate.
And Timothy, as the patriarch Bernie, I think your character is sort of the emotional center of the film in a way that sort of sneaks up on you in the last third of the film. Maybe I'm curious if you could just speak about how you approached the character as a man who perhaps has deep wells of feeling but struggles to articulate them or struggles to make them legible to his children.
Well, exactly that. The character is, you know, somebody who has conveniently cast himself within the family dynamic. He's a patriarch, but he's kind of like, he's not particularly an example of a paterfamilias. You know, he's more or less a kind of man baby on one level, and he's played up to that. He's allowed himself to be excused and to be the joker, the avoidant character, the person who throws up smoke screens, kind of slightly, you know, irritating jokes and so on and so forth. He's an extremely, you know, sort of self-confessed foolish character, but actually naturally so. But in a way, he's a very natural man who has never really, in one level, developed to a certain degree. He's very much a flatliner from the person he's been all this time. But of course, there's an accretion of stuff that's built up. I mean, you do get a couple of moments where you see him with June alone, when you realise all of this stuff about being told to shut up, being always on the state of being cancelled within the family, does belie the fact that there is 50 years of marriage, and there's a couple of moments where he just says to her, "You all right, June?" And she doesn't answer. And because she doesn't answer, you know she's heard, and you know that they're beyond words in this relationship. But I mean, it's a fantastic character to play. Having said all that, I knew that there was this wonderful moment where he does go privately and quietly. He walks away. His son has accused him of not loving his mother, which destroys him inside. And this eventually happens, as this expression. this beautiful song that comes out that is not the song, it's not anything to do with it's a retching out of something so painful in him. But I'd like to add just something a little bit. I've been trying to analyse recently why this group of people are so special, with this experience with this fantastic person here and these fantastic people has been so brilliant and rare. And just listening to them speak, listening Joe simply talk about how he built the characters slowly by slowly, how they grew and naturally, which was almost like a very simple and deeply unpretentious and wonderful, honest pointing out of how you write something. Kate's explanation of how she took hold of this, facilitated with everybody else. These brilliant two actors here talking about how they approach their characters. It just illustrated the amount of thought, natural thought, that is not required any congratulations from anybody, a collaboration of a group of like-minded artists without any bullshit, without any misplaced ego being rubbed or displaced in the wrong area, all placed directly and firmly right into the centre of making the piece work in an organic sense. I've been wondering, why has this job been so fantastic? And when I listen, I've been listening to them a bit, but this is so clear and clear. I realise it's because they're all really brilliant and clever and unpretentious and fantastic and go about their work in the most deeply unpretentious way and put every bit of energy, no ego displacement, or smack bang into the work to create a collaborated piece. And if it comes out well, and I think it probably has, and I'm never that objective about it, I think it's because of that. And it's a real joy to sit every time and listen to these people talking at a beat and ask to join in.
Well, that's
It's rare.
and truly, again, a family affair. That's the aspect that comes across. I'm sorry to say we're out of time here, but I hope everyone will join us in the Furman Gallery for the reception. Please remain seated while our guests make their way out to the lobby. Thank you all
Thank you so much.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.